There we go. There we go. Now my video set up. There we go. All right. Instagram was good. All the other places were not. There we go. So now we seem to be all good to go here. So today we got some really cool stuff to talk about. So I've been thinking about a lot about kind of what's been going on in the news in terms of inflation and everything that's going on. And I thought this was actually a really good time to maybe talk about kind of first principles thinking when it comes to understanding inflation, understanding money. I'm going to go kind of like into some deep history here, but this is something when you walk away with this, you'll understand what's going on in ways you kind of don't understand in your kind of typical or usual way of thinking. Just understand what first principles thinking is. To explain what that is, it's a philosophy that Elon Musk popularized, and it's a way of thinking that really takes things down to its core level, stripping away to what is the actual core essence of something, and then being able to build on top of that. So I'll give some examples of this in terms of understanding this, but I think it's just super important of understanding how money, wealth, and real estate kind of all work together. And in terms of first principles thinking, how to understand kind of what's going on in the world today, how to prepare, how to protect yourself, how to get, if you're an asset owner, get investment for your building. If you're an investor, be able to get your money in the right spot for stuff, to kind of protect yourself for things that are going forward. So right now, today, the U.S. is the world's reserve currency, right? And that was not always the case, right? So the U.S. is the world reserve currency, and the question is how? Like, what transpired to be able to lead to the United States dollar becoming the world reserve currency? So this really actually, there's a good example. Kind of goes back to there's a book I read which I recommend that everyone read. It's called Why Nations Fail. And the beginning of the book gives this following scenario. There's a city or town in Arizona. It's on the Arizona U.S. border with Mexico, and half the town is actually in Arizona, half the town is in Mexico. And historically, what happened with this town was that this town was, before there was a line drawn of Mexico and North and the United States, it was a single town that was living out there in the desert, right? That they were living there, right? Culturally, today, even till today, both sides, the U.S. side and the Mexico side, culturally are very similar. The difference today is that there's a wall, with the border crossing the middle of the town. On the U.S. side, it's your regular kind of suburban, middle class type of town where people are living. They have these, nice homes, and everyone's driving cars, nice paved roads, shopping malls, etc. Literally on the other side of the wall, and keep in mind, it's culturally the same thing. They're living in mud shacks and dirt roads and no electricity, right? Literally the other side of the wall. Like, even though culturally these people were exactly the same, and they grew. They're both of them are 3,000 miles away from their capital cities. What led to these people having such kind of a wild separation between wealth and prosperity and abject poverty on different sides? And it goes back to kind of like the history of how the United States and the U.S. and South and Central America, how they developed when both the Spaniards and the British came to colonize two areas. So one of the Spaniards kind of followed the following pattern when they would go and kind of take over an area in South America, which is basically they would come to an area, kill the leader of a specific tribe, and then make everyone go mine for gold, and they would become rich. That was kind of the formula that the Spaniards were using to be able to kind of build wealth in South America and to be able to then take that gold back to Spain, back to where they were going. And in England, they were looking at this and saying, hey, we have claims on the New World. Let's send our people to North America to do exactly the same thing. So it was initially, there was the Virginia company that sent John Smith. If anyone's seen the Pocahontas movie, right, the actual real John Smith was charged with, he actually wasn't charged with, there was a mutiny on the ship. That's a whole other story. He wound up being the person in charge of this entire project. And he winds up coming to North America with the thought that they're going to enslave the Indians by killing the chief, then enslave everyone to go mine the gold. And basically, he writes back to the people in England is that, okay, so the Indians don't care if we kill their chief; they will kill us anyways if we kill their chief. And there's no gold, right? So what do we do now? So they said, instead of us sending people who are going to kind of force and conquer a nation or people to be able to do what we want to do, we have to focus on doing what we can with the resources that we have here. So what they basically did was they sent us blacksmiths, sent us people who can help us create industry here in what today is Virginia. That was where they landed. And they basically started the kind of co-op model where people were able to come and they were essentially given, here's your plot of land, and you can grow and build what you want to on your plot of land. And what you'll do is, if you're that landowner, if you take on that responsibility, you are given a say in the local government, and you can decide how you want the economy to run. You have a say in that, right? That was how the first colony was ever created in what eventually became the United States, right? So word went back to the people in Virginia, or people in England, that this is what they were doing, and they were having a lot of success with this. So they started additional expeditions to the New World to be able to start developing colonies and building resources and building things there as well. One of the examples was Lord Baltimore. So I'm from Baltimore originally. He landed in what today is Maryland, and he took over the area, and he had a different model. His model was, you're going to come and basically you're going to do what we tell you to do, and you're going to work. And everyone came, and they're like, and we're going to pay you a wage. We'll give you, housing and food, everything, and you just focus on working, and you go and work. And eventually, people who were doing this were like, hey, listen, if we can stay here and do this and live under these conditions, or we can go to Virginia and we get our own plot of land and kind of chart our own course for our own future. And so a lot of people left. Same thing happened in North Carolina, right? The original North Carolina colony. And they wound up leaving, and all of a sudden people in Baltimore or Maryland and North Carolina were like, where'd all our people go? And they also wound up shifting to kind of this different to this other model that Virginia had originally pioneered. Originally, the 13 colonies, which were separate, were kind of self-governing, following this model where people would come and they would get land to be able to work on and be able to take part in the local government to be able to have a say and also help build the economy. And eventually, obviously, we know what happens. England wanted to tax it, and no taxation, no representation, started the Revolutionary War, and the United States was born. That's basically the short background of basically how the U.S. was founded. But it all goes back to, I'll tell you the key point. Here's a key point. What drove this entire development was real estate, right? Real estate was what drove the entire development for this, being able to come and have land to be able to grow. And if you grow something, the value of this land increases, right? And because it's yielding for myself, and I get all the additional benefits. If I build a house on this plot of land, there's benefit for that, right? So this is what the initial founding of the U.S. was real estate, as opposed to South America, which was gold, which is essentially a commodity, right? It's a currency. Gold was the currency really up until 1971, when the U.S. dollar was taken off the gold standard. The gold was the currency of the world. So Spain was mining currency, whereas the United States, or what became the United States, was creating wealth through real estate, and actually growing their nation, and growing their country. So I think, though, the next stage is also kind of interesting. So I'm going to tie in another kind of interesting point here, is that as the U.S. started to grow and build, as more people came, there was more investment, there was more immigrants. The colonies in the East Coast became very saturated, so people started to move out west. Now, the issue that people had with moving out west was that if you're storing all your wealth in gold, you got to go get into one of these wagons and basically go across the prairie, for weeks and weeks at a time with no one around. Very easy for someone to come, robbers, bandits. This was how things worked in the Wild West. Would come and just steal all your wealth, right? So what ended up happening was the initial banking system was actually a decentralized banking system in the United States. So the bank would say, hey, listen, we'll hold your gold for you. We'll keep it safe while you go and you travel, and we'll issue you these notes that say that these notes are redeemable for gold. And what happened was that there were a lot of different banks throughout the country, throughout the United States, that basically started to say, hey, listen, I'll accept your notes, you'll accept my notes. And it created a decentralized banking system. So now we have kind of 2 points here. We have a decentralized system that's driving the actual currency, all built on, right, the foundation of the country, which was the development of real estate, right, as well as also the commodity which people used as currency and as money. Give me 1 second. I just want to check my notes here. So eventually a decentralized banking system set up. Okay, fine. So what's interesting is that this is the system that was that allowed the U.S. kind of to flourish in the 1800s. What was happening on the other side, right? At this time, the world reserve currency was actually the British pound, right? And Britain was expanding their empire, and they were spending a lot of money to be able to expand their empire all over the world. This led up to World War One, and what happened was in World War One, the Germans who were fighting the Allies. Their currency was the mark, and it was essentially a fiat currency, essentially what the U.S. dollar is today. And they were printing tons of money to be able to finance their side of the war, and England was limited because because their money was backed by their gold reserves. So they started printing more and more money, right, fractional reserve against the gold reserve they had, and they were basically neck and neck. And there was kind of like a currency war to keep kind of things growing and keeping this war kind of alive until the U.S. entered the war and threw the balance of power to the Allies side, and then hold on, I'm getting some comments here. I'm not sure if these are supposed to be appropriate comments or not. Anyways, so what happened was the United States then eventually became the world reserve currency. So this leads kind of the ideas of what the first principles of money are. So I kind of mentioned this in one of my comments a few weeks ago, which is that what's important for money, like what is defined as money, is there's basically 5 components. It has to be divisible, so you can divide it up. It has to be durable, right? So you can't tarnish or destroy it. It has to be recognizable, so it can't be counterfeit. It's got to be portable, so you can move it from place to place. And it's got to be scarce. Now, there's a difference between money and wealth. Right? This is kind of an important distinction to understand. Money is what you would use for transacting, right? And most people's view of what wealth is money. It's dollar bills. This is what it means. But in terms of what wealth means, it means basically being able to store and keep your ability or the value of what you have to be able to, or your purchasing power at a later date, that in a way that ideally no one can manipulate. Because the reality today, we're seeing the inflation today. This is directly is being caused by the printing of the U.S. dollar over the past 2 years because of the pandemic. 40% of all dollars in existence were created in the past 2 years. So just thinking back to the time where they were printed, 40% were created in the past few years. And which basically means if someone's working and holding their wealth in dollars, somebody somewhere else, without doing anything to them, right? It's not like I have to go into your house and steal your money. I can literally print your money away, and the money that you're holding on to has less value. So by being able to then take your wealth and store it in something else that's going to not be controlled or manipulated by someone else is going to be absolutely key to protecting yourself in terms when it comes to preserving your wealth and protecting yourself from inflation that it happens as it kind of rears going forward. So just understand kind of what assets are just in terms of size. So the crypto market right now, which is growing it's the fastest growing asset class in history, is at between 2 and 2.5 trillion today, right? 2.5 trillion today is where the crypto market is at. Gold, the entire gold market is 10 trillion. So crypto is 25% of 10 trillion. Stocks, which is where a lot of people get their money, is 93 trillion. The stock market is 93 trillion. Real estate is 300 trillion, right? So real estate is actually the biggest asset class in the world in terms of that people use to be able to protect their wealth. And why? Real estate is the largest because it's the most stable. It's very hard to move. If we go back to our 5 principles of money here, let's just point something out here that this is something that can be used as money, can also be used to store your wealth. So real estate, I guess it's kind of divisible. You can divide it different areas and sell different parts of it. Is it durable? Yeah, it's durable. It's very hard to destroy. To destroy land. Is it recognizable? Yeah, it's not portable, right? So if I want to go do business with someone, in Japan, I can't go sell part of my land and give it to them as part of what I'm doing. And it also is scarce. So real estate actually follows 4 of those 5 key kind of principles of wealth, of storing money. And this, at the end of the day, is actually what Solidblock is doing, right? We're making ownership of real estate easier by using the crypto rails, not kind of like not the assets, but using technology to kind of break down ownership to actually be able to add that 5th layer of money to make real estate investing, potentially portable as well, potentially even be used as money. So this is kind of an interesting kind of integration. You have this fastest growing asset class in the world, which is crypto, and you have real estate, which is the largest growing asset, but the most, I would say, inconvenient to be able to use in terms of day to day. But by combining the two, combining how ownership is defined, this is kind of a key point. And keep in mind, like the ownership winds up coming back to what a lot of these nations were built on, right? The people who decided this is where we're going to live, we're going to fight to protect our home, we're going to set up our governments accordingly. The governments will wind up defining who owns what, right? But today we can actually have a scenario where technology can define who owns what in a completely trustless and nonviolent system or way. So I want to kind of also kind of highlight this. Is interesting because we're kind of moving back to a form of decentralization in terms of our money. Like we kind of had this kind of arc where we had real estate as our kind of base here, right? And then you had the banking system on top of that, which was a decentralized system, which actually led to the strength and power and growth of what became the U.S. Dominant, the dollar as a dominant currency in the world. And now it's been coming over the past 100 years more and more centralized. And what we're doing is we're actually trying to move back towards decentralization. And the benefit of decentralization is that the more decentralized something is, right, the stronger it winds up being. Right, if you think about a spider's web, one of those points, right? Anyone can break a spider's web, but the web as a whole has significantly more strength than a single strand from that spider web. And the same thing, the more centralized something is, the more points of failure they have, the more decentralized something is. Right, part of that network can go down and doesn't impact anything. What we've seen over the past, particularly with the web and the internet over the past 20 years, that the strongest companies are the ones that are able to build strong networks amongst themselves: Facebook, Amazon, Google, etc. So I want to wrap it up over here and just kind of recap what we covered. So how the U.S. dollar became the world reserve asset, right? Because inflation is diluting its purchasing power today more and more. There isn't anything right now that's prime to take its place, so it has some wiggle room to be able to do that. But the point is that for the average person, if they're holding their money in U.S. dollars, that someone else somewhere else can create more of those dollars, diluting your purchasing power, right? So the most important thing to do is be able to move your money, like, what is money? Money is essentially a battery for previous work you've done that you can use at some point in the future. Right? That's kind of like the time horizon that we're dealing with. So by being able to take the work that you've done and store it more powerfully, right, in a more powerful, untouchable way in the long term, is where you'll really wind up saving and protecting yourself in the long run, right? Decentralization, right, is the best way to achieve growth. Decentralized systems were very hard to do on I would say in a mechanical world. Now we're living in the digital world, and particularly in the blockchain world. Decentralization is where strength comes from. Decentralized processes, decentralized things, there's no point of failure. There's no single point of failure. Parts of it can fail. The overall system will still remain strong, and decentralization is coming back to more and more things in everyday life, in terms of money, in terms of how we're going to run businesses and everything. Decentralization is making its way right now. And I'm just going to read this. Why today the U.S. dollar is making the same mistakes that empires throughout history have made that led to losing their reserve currency status. There's actually a very interesting video that just came out like a week or two ago from Ray Dalio, where he actually it's a video he made highlighting his recent book, The Changing World Order, where he actually dives into the previous world superpowers going back to I think 500 years. So I think back to 1500, and showing how all of them and their downfall have extremely predictable patterns, and we're actually seeing those patterns today. Right, it starts with printing money. Right, it starts with printing money. You see this. This is what happened with England. This is what happened. Yes, Power of Nations, exactly. Good stuff. This is what happened with England. 100 years ago, when they had to print all this money against their gold reserves, eventually leading to their currency collapsing. It was Dutch, and I don't remember the other examples that he used, but this is kind of what's going on today. So that's what we covered. I hope you guys really enjoyed this. I will say, if you want to learn more about what's going on with kind of this digital asset revolution, SolidBlock has a free download you can go check out. It's called the Digital Asset Handbook. Great resource for understanding, again, kind of continuing the learning of these first principles approaches, because to understand how the digital economy, digital assets are going to be changing in the world. It's great. It's a great ebook. It's been endorsed by 2 U.S. senators, Cynthia Lumens and Ted Cruz. You can go and check it out, solidblock.co/DAH, right? Digital Asset Handbook. solidblock.co/DAH. So go check it out, and I'll see y'all later.